Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Welcome to America Decides. Looming over our political coverage today, Paradise Lost. No, not the 17th century epic poem by John Milton, but what part of Florida's paradise could be lost to Hurricane Milton? Fearing the worst, President Biden canceled a scheduled overseas trip as that hurricane moves toward Florida. Ahead, in just a moment, we will have the latest on Milton. On the campaign trail, Vice President Kamala Harris is joining several popular TV shows in New York City today. She's already made stops at The View and The Howard Stern Show. Tonight, she will be on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. Last night, you might have noticed, I certainly hope you did, she was on CBS News' 60 Minutes and was questioned on everything from the war in Israel to her vision for the economy.
My plan is about saying that when you invest in small businesses, you invest in the middle class, and you strengthen America's economy.
Importantly, former President Trump decided not to take part in his own 60 Minutes interview. Today, he canceled a virtual health care event due to the looming storm in Florida. We start tonight in Florida. Our Manuel Bojorquez is tracking Hurricane Milton from Orlando. Manny, what can you tell us?
Well, Major, we're at a gas station that has been busy throughout the entire afternoon, even with a line at times and people arguing over gas pumps at times as they try to get their final preparations in order and as Milton closes in. We do know that tonight the state of Florida is asking the Florida Highway Patrol to escort tanker trucks into gas stations along the evacuation zone to replenish the supply as the hurricane begins to move in, because the time to prepare is starting to dwindle. So what do we have here in Orlando? Even though it's not supposed to get the worst of the storm surge that will hit the West Coast, you have people from the West Coast who are filling the shelters and the hotels here, but they will still not escape the impacts of a hurricane, because currently the forecast has it as a Category 2 over Orlando, 90 miles inland from where it may make landfall. So there are preparations here in Orlando itself for what could be prolonged power outages when trees and power lines go down, and for flash flooding that could come with the rainfall that's expected.
Manny, as you know, having covered many of these storms, they are times of testings for governors and state emergency management teams. What is Governor DeSantis saying today?
Well, he's trying to make the point clear that the time to evacuate is now and that it will soon close. And we have heard from people who rode out Helene who said, we saw how bad that was, and if this is expected to be worse, we're not willing to take our chances. Our home may not be there when we get back, but we want to escape this one with our lives. So from the governor and the federal government and forecasters, it seems, given what this area just experienced with Helene, that the message is getting across to get to higher ground and to do so quickly, because by this time tomorrow, even here into the Orlando area, we could already be starting to see the first impacts, outer bands, the rain that could start to flood roads develop, and people do not need to be traveling in that.
Manny, have you encountered anyone there who's going to try to ride this out?
You know, people here in Orlando may decide to stay in their homes because they're not expected to get the storm surge. Our experience in talking to people here has been that those who live along the West Coast, where the storm surge was bad enough with Helene, which did not make a direct impact in that area, it sideswiped it, that they're not willing to take their chances this time. In Fort Myers, which was hit hard 2 years ago, I'm getting messages from people saying, God, I wish I could stay home, but this one, based on what we saw last time, we're gonna have to get out. So the message is being heard loud and clear. There may always be people that decide to stay, and the emergency authorities have told them, look, there is a point where if you need emergency aid, we may not be able to get to you.
Manuel Bojorquez, as always, thank you very much. Now to the campaign. Jake Rosen and Scott MacFarlane joins us now. Jake here at the table, Scott MacFarlane at the White House. Scott, you put into our system earlier this afternoon a letter written by a Republican member of the House from North Carolina attempting in one place at one time to combat a blizzard, if you will, of disinformation about Helene. Can you summarize some of that for us, please?
This is quite a moment for any member of Congress, Major, trying to respond and get all the federal assets to your constituents who've been hammered by a natural disaster. Chuck Edwards of Western North Carolina represents those mountainous areas, those areas that were just pillaged by Hurricane Helene. But he spent part of his day having to craft this letter to the public and to his constituents, debunking the myths, knocking down the conspiracy theories and the misinformation that has pervaded this entire storm, the aftermath, and the federal recovery. Among the things he says in the letter, Major, is that the government doesn't control the weather. This was not an operation of the government to pillage or target North Carolina, that he's dedicating some of his bandwidth to that mission while also trying to help his constituents respond to this disaster tells you how combustible, how toxic this disinformation is and how important it is for stakeholders, both parties at many levels, to try to knock this down.
I want to bring in Jake Rosen because one of the loudest voices contributing to this cloud, if you will, of disinformation and misinformation and deliberate deception is former President Trump, who has said many things that are not true, provably false, that money is not going to hurricane victims. Instead, billions have been stolen and given to undocumented immigrants. Not true. That there have been no helicopter flights for rescue. When he said it, not true. And other things amplified by those in the Trump media echo chamber. Address that, Jake.
Well, one of the biggest new alliances in the kind of MAGA world is Elon Musk and Donald Trump. We saw on Saturday in Butler, Pennsylvania, Elon Musk sharing the stage with the former president for the first time in a very profound moment and rally for the former president, with all camera eyes, all eyes of Trump supporters on that rally to prove this alliance. And Trump, for the last week, has been touting what Elon Musk has done in places like North Carolina and Tennessee in terms of helping with Starlink. But at the same time, what Elon Musk is also doing is pouring gasoline on this fire of media, of misinformation and lies, frankly, about what's going on there. And talking about, Elon Musk has been talking about how this changes the election and how this will impact Republicans not being able to vote. Donald Trump has also echoed that. When you talk about the flights, Elon Musk was personally attacking Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg over this, saying he was hearing calls from people, without being specific, who couldn't land aid helicopters. Donald Trump has spread the same lies continually for over a week now about what is going on the ground there, even though he's been there and heard from people like Brian Kemp, heard from people
Governor
like
of Georgia, Republican,
and the governor of South Carolina,
Henry McMaster,
who both have said that they're getting the assistance and what they need in terms of this hurricane. We've also heard from Republican local officials, not just the congressman that Scott mentioned, but also mayors of towns in Tennessee who are saying this needs to stop because our constituents don't trust us with what we're doing, which again, when you come back to elections, when you come back to what the services the government provides for constituents, it's very hard when they don't trust what they're being given, especially in a time of grieving and crisis in these communities.
Scott, I want to go back to you for a moment because it's important for our audience to know, if it doesn't already, the origin story of the controlling the weather part of this, that Chuck Edwards, Republican of North Carolina, had to spend time in this lengthy letter combating. Give us the origin story on that.
Well, it's one of his colleagues, Georgia Republican Marjorie Taylor Greene, had made a social media post saying that there was, or at least alluding to the possibility that there's control of the weather by people. We put that aside because that is it's a conspiracy theory that he's knocking down inside his own party. There are broader concerns about how this disinformation is hampering the federal response and hampering, perhaps, the choice by people in Florida to evacuate, Major. If there's any dubiousness, if there's any lack of trust in government forecasting, there's concern that may be a disincentive for people to get out of Florida right now, as they should be. Let's also put that aside for a moment, because there's a new concern emerging that Congress will have to deal with and deal with promptly. They are running short on some federal aid in the Small Business Administration Disaster Loan Program. They have only a matter of weeks of funding left after Milton strikes. And there's a call now among some members of Congress and members of the administration for Congress to do something about that before their target date of returning to Washington in mid-November. That's going to be a pressing issue over the next few days.
Jake, I want to turn to you very briefly because in the last 24 hours, Trump has begun to softly back away from some of this disinformation about Helene in much the way he and J.D. Vance have backed away from the misinformation and disinformation deliberately spread about Springfield, Ohio. This looks like a pattern.
It certainly is, and it's something that they've done repeatedly for the last couple of months, not just in the recent weeks since Donald Trump brought up the Springfield, Ohio issue and what's going on there, but these are based in grains of truth, right? That people in Springfield feel an influx of people who are not from their community.
And some services were stressed.
Absolutely. We see in Aurora,
which we have covered repeatedly here.
And in Aurora, Colorado, where Donald Trump is going later this week to make that point to constituents there, holding a rally there to further politicize what's going on there. But we've also seen this just across the country when Donald Trump talks about what's going on with the storm in terms of just there is a grain of truth. Maybe you don't see FEMA on your block that day, right? At the same time, that doesn't mean that they're not working. There are thousands of people, thousands of chainsaws, millions and billions of dollars pouring into these communities. Again, it's a federal agency. It might take a little bit of time to get there, but in terms of telling people that the aid is not on the way, telling people are deliberately blocking the trucks, those things are not true. They feed the anxiety and the anger. Again, as these communities, especially in places like North Carolina, where the Congressman Chuck Edwards pointed out, are certainly grieving for full towns completely lost, people looking for something to grab onto, and Trump is giving them further anger and further fuel onto that anger.
And by the time the fact-check cavalry arrives, they've moved on to something else and start soft-pedaling something that got them extravagant headlines and a lot of attention a few days before. Jake Rosen and Scott MacFarlane at the White House, thank you very much.